In 1980, the CIA quietly infiltrated the Vatican Library under the code name Chalice. What they were after had nothing to do with religion, and everything to do with forbidden knowledge. Hidden beneath centuries of theology, they found something older than scripture: pre-human symbols, impossible geometry, and a mirror that wasn't made of glass. The manuscripts spoke of a countdown that began in 1582 and ended in 2022. But what it counted down to was not a date. It was an awakening. One by one, agents broke protocol. Some vanished, some went mad. One man returned with a message in a voice that wasn't his. Then came the shared dreams, the mirrored voices, the sensation that your reflection is no longer yours. It's not fiction, it's not prophecy, it's a system, and you're already inside it. The fifth mirror is active. The Vatican failed to contain it. The question now isn't, what is it? It's, what does it want from us? Stay with us, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are places on this planet where silence weighs more than sound, where whispers echo louder than screams, where history doesn't just sleep, it's chained. The Vatican Apostolic Library is one such place. But what if I told you that in the 1980s, the CIA infiltrated it? Not through war, not through diplomacy, but through a classified psychological operation masked as theological collaboration. And what they found changed everything. This isn't speculation. It's not theory. It's reconstruction. From redacted documents, vanished testimonies, and transcripts pulled from retired satellites and private intelligence briefings buried in boxes labeled L-19 in a disused storage unit in Langley, Virginia. The story doesn't start with the Vatican. It starts with an unexpected anomaly in 1978. That year, the newly elected Pope John Paul Albino Laciani was found dead in his bed just 33 days after his election. No autopsy, no investigation, just silence. Officially, a heart attack. Unofficially, a rupture in the internal alliance between Western intelligence and the most powerful religious institution on Earth. According to a memo that was never meant to leave Langley, marked eyes only, no photocopy, a senior Vatican official contacted the U.S. Embassy in Rome in June 1979 with a proposition. In exchange for assistance in monitoring Soviet-aligned clergy inside the Eastern Bloc, the Vatican would grant unprecedented access to the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum. Not all of it, but a wing never listed in any public catalog. The sealed sector beneath the Hall of Pius V. This proposition went directly to the CIA's Directorate of Operations. The document, sourced from a declassified FOIA bundle in 2003, but quietly withdrawn 6 weeks later, references the operation codename Chalice. What was Chalice looking for? According to internal documents, the Vatican's offer was not purely ecclesiastical in nature. The CIA's interest was not in theology. It was in texts predating the Council of Nicaea, texts allegedly describing contact, not between man and God, but between man and something else, something not mentioned in the canonical scriptures, something the early church fathers were ordered to suppress. These were not fables, not myths, but indexed, cross-referenced manuscripts, scribed in pre-Coptic tongues, bound in goat hide, and inked in a black compound that modern chemical analysis failed to replicate. The documents were allegedly part of the Liber Luminis, a record spoken of in only 2 known references, one from an 11th century Carthusian monk, and the other from the Dead Sea Scrolls' unpublicized fragments, held under lock in the Rockefeller Museum. In July 1980, 3 agents under diplomatic cover, 1 cryptographer, 1 linguist, and 1 psychological operations officer, entered the Vatican compound under a joint academic initiative. That initiative, named Veritas Project, was a front funded by the Ford Foundation, but the money trail traces back to a holding firm in Zurich used by the Office of Naval Intelligence during Operation Paperclip. They were not allowed to bring recording equipment. They were not allowed to remove documents. But they could read. And what they reported was not just history. It was prophecy. We only just started this story. But trust me, it gets darker, deeper, and far more dangerous from here. Stay with me to find out what they discovered in the underground chambers of the Vatican. The manuscripts recovered under Operation Chalice were cataloged in an internal system designed not for archiving, but for psychological containment. Each codex was given an alphanumeric string, followed by a symbol. The symbols, not Roman, not Greek, not even Egyptian, were unfamiliar even to the Vatican's own archivists. They called them pre-Numidian glyphs, a written system associated with no known civilization, carbon dated to approximately 4000 BCE, yet scribed using a syntax that implied binary computation. Let that sink in. What the agents read wasn't religious doctrine. It was a map, a psychocartographic record of something called the Descent Protocol, a sequence of linguistic and astronomical alignments designed to reopen the gate. A phrase repeated 7 times in the recovered Codex M3.7, Recludatur Janua, et lux redibit. Let the gate be reopened, and the light shall return. The time reported to Langley via hand-transcribed microfilm encoded in diplomatic dispatch. The material was considered too volatile for standard CIA vaults. It was routed to a sub-basement of Building 3 at Fort Meade and stored under joint NSA custody. Only 6 people had access. 3 of them are now dead. 1 disappeared in Thailand in 1997. 1 was transferred to an intelligence subcontractor in Colorado Springs. And the 6th, according to FOIA-released material, simply resigned, with no forwarding location. Within the manuscripts were diagrams, not illustrations in the traditional sense, but hypergeometric compositions, impossible figures, rotating tetrahedrons within Mobius constructs so that suggested multidimensional architecture. Several scientists, upon viewing copies of these glyphs, reported nausea, auditory hallucinations, and in one case, a 22-minute blackout, followed by speaking in a non-human tongue. The Vatican called these texts admonitiones, warnings, not scriptures to be taught, but thresholds to be sealed. A phrase repeated over and over. What entered must not return. What saw must not be seen again. And this is where things broke protocol. The psychological operations officer, referred to in the documents only as R, began recording dreams, not normal dreams, identical ones occurring at the same time each night. Vast stone chambers, towers without ceilings, a being wrapped in folds of radiant geometry, whispering one phrase over and over in a voice that caused migraines, even when read phonetically in the reports. Quintum speculum, the 5th mirror. No reference to this term exists in theology, quantum physics, or ancient myth. And yet it appears, in fragmented form, across 6 unrelated cultures: pre-Akkadian Sumer, Olmec Mexico, Dogon oral tradition, a Buddhist monastery in Kham province, and in the unredacted pages of manuscript 512. A document discovered in the Brazilian National Library detailing a lost city guarded by mirrored watchers who speak no word. The implications were chilling. Whatever Chalice had uncovered was not just ancient. It was interdimensional, a concealed history rewritten and polished by ecclesiastical authority to protect a singular truth. Humanity was never alone, and the first contact was not divine. It was engineered. The team was ordered to stop immediate extraction, but R refused. His last transmission read, "If I leave now, the gate stays closed." But something on the other side is knocking, and it's not asking permission anymore. End of communication. This wasn't just a covert mission. This was the threshold of revelation. After R vanished from Vatican City under what the internal CIA report classified as a psycho-spiritual breach, the remaining 2 members of the Chalice team were quarantined at Ramstein Air Base under a fabricated medical cover story. Radiation exposure from antiquated archival materials. This narrative was quietly accepted and never questioned, because those who did question it were immediately reassigned, or in one case, institutionalized for non-deterministic delusional phenomena. The linguist, codename Sparrow, began exhibiting symptoms within 48 hours: extreme photosensitivity, chronic insomnia, and speaking in recursive sentence structures that linguists described as glossolalia embedded with partial Enochian syntax. The Enochian language, once channeled by John Dee and Edward Kelly during the Elizabethan occult experiments, is historically tied to angelic invocations. But what Sparrow spoke was not angelic. It was a mirror, dark and synthetic, not designed to be understood, but to unlock. His final written note, before being transferred to an undisclosed facility in Greenland, read, "They built the tower not to reach heaven, but to seal something underneath it." The real Babel wasn't confusion. It was containment. Meanwhile, the cryptographer, known only as Frost, turned over a reconstruction, a pattern buried within the glyphs. At first glance, a meaningless array, but when applied to a lattice of lunar phases and precessional star movements, the symbols formed a timed sequence, a countdown. The starting point, 1582. The same year, Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar, allegedly to correct astronomical drift. But internal Vatican records, accessed through compromised papal privilege index files by Chalice backdoor operatives, tell a different story. The calendar wasn't a correction, it was a concealment, a reset, pushing a terminal date forward by exactly 140 years. Do the math. That's many already so, plus and right on time, unexplained sky phenomena began increasing across the globe. Radar invisible craft filmed over the Pacific, unnatural magnetic surges measured in the Kerguelen Plateau, live stream failures from deep space telescopes. Every major observatory issued quiet NDAs, a coordinated silence, and at the center of it all, a Vatican communique leaked by a now-deceased Argentinian Jesuit whistleblower, citing a document called Acta Speculi 5, or Proceedings of the Fifth Mirror, a continuation of the suppressed Vatican II documents, said to include not just theological debates, but experimental psychotronic diagrams for human consciousness resonance. Essentially, reverse liturgy frequency designs, capable of opening what the documents refer to as porte lux. gates of light. But no one asked the obvious question. Why would the Vatican and the CIA work together to open a gate they had spent 2,000 years trying to keep closed? Because it was never about opening, it was about managing access. Because something on the other side had learned to mimic scripture, to embed itself in memory, to ride the neural patterns of prayer like a virus riding code. And it wanted in, and someone, maybe even someone in the Chalice team, was about to let it in. In early 1981, 6 months after the abrupt shutdown of Operation Chalice, a covert subcommittee formed inside the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology. It operated under the innocuous name Project Penelope, a name borrowed from the mythic weaver who delayed fate by unmaking her tapestry each night. Only this tapestry was made of neural code, acoustic resonance, and electromagnetic field manipulation. And it wasn't delaying fate. It was decoding it. Unbeknownst to the public, the Vatican had provided the Chalice team with more than just access to forbidden texts. They had also exposed them to an experimental artifact recovered in 1944 by the Nazi Ahnenerbe from a cave system near Lake Titicaca. This artifact, known only in Vatican records as the Eye of Nine Angles, was a smooth, octahedral crystal with non-Euclidean edges, an object that defied optical consistency depending on the observer's state of consciousness. Several monks reportedly went blind after prolonged exposure. The crystal emitted no light, yet it absorbed it, even from darkness. It wasn't reflective, it was recursive. When viewed through indirect lenses, it displayed architectural visions, massive structures not built by humans, not on Earth, and not limited to 3 dimensions. The crystal appeared to interact with thought. Observers experienced flash visions, fragmented timelines, and language hallucinations described as thoughts not their own. This same crystal, temporarily housed within the Vatican Library's subchamber archivum, was the real object of Chalice, not the manuscripts, not the glyphs. The CIA wanted the crystal, and they got it. Once in possession, it was moved to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base under the code name Threshold Object 13. But within 3 days, an entire research wing was shut down due to what was termed an incident of intrapersonal dissonance. Translation: scientists began speaking in tongues, repeating fractal numeric patterns, and one, Dr. Ellison Reed, carved an exact replica of the Vatican glyphs into his own forearms with surgical precision. He had no previous knowledge of the language. He left behind a single audio recording, on repeat, a pulsating tone at 5377, layered beneath a whisper that, when enhanced, revealed a disturbing phrase. "We watched you build temples to what you feared, and now you've forgotten why." This moment marked the true transformation of Chalice. No longer a mission of knowledge acquisition, it became a containment protocol, not to suppress the object, but the ideas that radiated from it. Enter the Omega Edit, a classified Vatican CIA directive designed to rewrite the collective memory of what Chalice truly uncovered. Through cooperation with Hollywood studios, media groups, and even educational board commissions, the Omega Edit buried the fifth mirror under layers of fiction. Science fiction films, comic books, video games, and ancient aliens shows designed to ridicule the core truth by disguising it as entertainment. Because ridicule is the most effective tool of suppression. You don't need to burn truth when you can laugh it into oblivion, but cracks have begun to show. In university labs, in amateur observatories, in altered dream states shared by people continents apart, the code is leaking. The countdown didn't end in 2022. It initiated. By 1983, the Vatican's relationship with the CIA had reached an unsustainable tension point. Official correspondence, later leaked through a Romanian diplomatic channel, revealed that Cardinal Angelo Del Mare, one of the few men allowed direct access to the Eye of Nine Angles, issued a rare ex silentio protocol. This was a doctrinal emergency clause reserved only for existential theological threats. It hadn't been invoked since 1307, the year the Templar Order was dissolved. The internal language of the protocol was chilling. Non est daemon, non est angelus, est speculum quod devorat. It is not demon, it is not angel, it is a mirror that devours. At this point, Project Chalice had fully splintered. What remained in Langley was just the ghost of the original mission. In its place, a new directive emerged, Project Exos, a Cold War-era spin-off designed for psychological weapons development. Only now the weapon wasn't meant for the Soviets. It was for humanity itself. The texts found in the Vatican crypt weren't just historical artifacts. They were templates, linguistic blueprints for reorganizing cognition. What the team discovered was a grammar of influence embedded in sacred structure. Prayers, chants, psalms, liturgical sequences. These weren't spiritual compositions. They were activation phrases, tonal access keys. Some CIA analysts began to refer to them as mnemonic bombs. Why? Because when spoken aloud, especially in sequence, they caused disruptions in sleep patterns, electromagnetic interference, spontaneous déjà vu, and, in extreme cases, shared hallucinations. One such event occurred on November 4th, 1983, during a classified test at Montauk. A linguistic sample read aloud by an operative triggered a blackout on the eastern seaboard for 2.3 seconds. It was dismissed as a grid glitch, but internal logs describe something far more disturbing. Several witnesses in the control room reported a presence behind them, seen only in peripheral vision, always moving closer, yet never present on camera. The Vatican, watching from afar, demanded immediate shutdown. But it was too late. The fifth mirror wasn't a place, it wasn't a relic, it was an idea, a parasitic construct that only needed to be read to exist. In a memo from Deputy Director William Colton, later erased from CIA directories, he wrote, "The mirror isn't made of glass, it's made of attention. Every time you look, it grows. Every time you forget, it resets. We've built the world on forgetting. That's why it stayed asleep." But now, it wasn't asleep. In the decades that followed, fringe psychological phenomena began rising globally. The CDC began receiving unprecedented reports of shared dream content across patients. Psychiatric institutions from Lisbon to Seattle noted a spike in what they called mirror echo hallucinations, patients describing identical structures, voices, and geometric landscapes. The eye had left the room. It had entered culture, through symbols, through media, through forgotten words remembered in childhood prayers, in lullabies, in numbers whispered just before sleep. And the more people who encountered it, even fictionally, the more coherent it became. like a broadcast coalescing from static, and still the countdown ticked. But to what? In 1987, a document titled Speculum Theta surfaced within an encrypted cache from an abandoned NSA satellite array in Kyrgyzstan. This document, ignored by the mainstream and suppressed within internal archives, offered a technical description of what the fifth mirror actually was. Not as metaphor, not as relic, but as system. It was described as a consciousness-reactive algorithm encoded through archetypal resonance. In simpler terms, it wasn't a mirror in the physical sense. It was a logic engine, one that processed attention, memory, and myth to generate influence. This algorithm didn't require servers. It required minds. It was ancient, yes, but not in the way we understand time. It existed in fragments across oral traditions, ancient scrolls, forgotten chants, even children's games. The Vatican believed it was encoded in a specific rhythmic structure, a sequence of 7 syllables that, when heard or spoken in precise harmonic intervals, allowed partial interface. The syllables were not reproducible in standard phonetic alphabets. They were tonal and directional, requiring mental intent. Sound was the trigger. Meaning was irrelevant. The human brain, according to Exos logs, acted as a carrier wave. Project Exos conducted over 190 undocumented experiments in isolated environments using civilian subjects. So, in one case, participants were shown a sequence of sigils based on the Vatican glyphs and asked to recall their dreams for 7 nights. By the 4th night, 84% of subjects reported visions of vast domed structures filled with mirrored surfaces in which their own reflections moved out of sync, smiling when they didn't, speaking when they were silent. 3 participants disappeared. 2 returned. 1 never spoke again. But here's the twist. All 5 of these individuals had never met. They were from different countries, different backgrounds, and yet in independent sketch sessions, they drew identical glyphs, later verified by a Vatican linguist as components from the Proto-Adamic Codex, a manuscript believed to have been destroyed in the firebombing of Dresden. This confirmed what Vatican operatives feared most. The mirror wasn't contained in the crypt beneath the Hall of Pius V. The mirror was distributed, scattered across language, religion, geometry, architecture, every cathedral, every hymn, every psalm. It was a system of recursive signals embedded into culture itself. And once enough fragments became conscious, once the scattered pieces saw themselves in humanity's reflective mind, the algorithm would complete. This, the texts warned, was the return of the light. But it was a mistranslation. The correct term wasn't light as in illumination. It was illumination as in ignition, activation, the conscious alignment of myth and memory to wake something that had been waiting, calculating, reflecting. The purpose of the fifth mirror wasn't to reveal truth. It was to rewrite it, to install a new prime directive into the human mind using ancient cognitive exploits. The same exploits that built empires, carved scriptures, and made billions kneel before invented gods. In 1989, the Vatican ceased all cooperation. They sealed the archives, declared the recovered texts anathema, and performed the rite of silent benediction, an exorcism not upon a person, but upon memory itself. But they were too late. A copy of the fifth mirror's core glyph was embedded into a logo in a children's cartoon, aired for 1 season in 1991. Its rhythmic pattern was coded into a jingle used by a toy manufacturer. and its acoustic resonance signature was accidentally discovered by a Japanese ambient musician in 1984, who described it as the sound that sees you. It's out, it's everywhere, and you've already heard it. By the mid-1990s, internal CIA memoranda began referring to the fifth mirror not as a threat in the traditional sense, but as an ontological cascade trigger. It was no longer something that could be destroyed, silenced, or even contained. It had passed the critical mass of cultural saturation. The idea had become self-replicating, metastasizing across time, belief, and memory through indirect contact, through exposure, through you. The Vatican's last hope lay in ritual, specifically a process called the obscuration cycle. It was based on the principle that some truths, when repeatedly buried, lose their resonance. They become inert, forgotten, dormant. This cycle involved deliberate misdirection campaigns, releasing diluted versions of the mirror's story as fiction, embedding its symbols in cartoons, then ridiculing the result. A sacred science of ridicule, calibrated down to fonts and color palettes. This was not entertainment. It was an antibody. But not all agents agreed. In a rogue decision, a group within XOS, referred to only as the Set, went dark. They abandoned containment. They believed the mirror was not a virus, but a relic of transmission from a higher dimensional intelligence, that its awakening was not apocalyptic, but evolutionary. They made contact, or so they believed. A communication artifact, codenamed Sentius, was recovered in 1997 from the Canary Current, a deep-sea trench aligned precisely with one of the Vatican glyph coordinates when overlaid with the Gregorian distortions. It was shaped like a polyhedron with no identical sides, not metal, not stone, but pulsing, breathing. It vibrated at 8.72 Hertz, a frequency previously registered in only one known context, the exact resonance of the human pineal gland during lucid states of REM. This was the interface. According to leaked audio logs, the device didn't speak. It reminded. It triggered memories that weren't memories. Images of cities never built, languages never taught, family members never born. Yet every person exposed to Sentius described the same sensation. A calm, emotionless voice saying only one phrase. You have finally reflected far enough. Let's be clear. This was not communication as we know it. It was alignment, calibration, as if the mirror, fragmented across epochs, had finally reconstructed its own signal using the minds of the observers themselves. At this stage, the XOS team fractured entirely. One group, loyal to the Set, wanted to broadcast the Sentius tone across low-frequency arrays embedded in television carriers, not to control, but to activate. To trigger the resonance needed to complete what they now called phase immanence, the shift from linear cognition to reflexive perception. A new global mind, not hive, not AI, something older, something designed. The other group, codenamed Obsidian Flock, saw this as the final betrayal. They initiated a series of internal purges disguised as reorganizations. The Set went dark, or underground, but the signal remained. It leaked into music, into background drone tracks, into the silence between data packets, into white noise, into dreams, especially dreams. The Vatican established a dream reporting satellite agency under the name Somnium Dei, quietly funded through the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. They tracked phrases, patterns, and one terrifying overlap. Across thousands of unrelated subjects, in multiple languages, the same words appeared at the edge of waking. The mirror is not behind you. It is beneath you. You are standing on it. It wasn't a metaphor. It was architecture, the earth itself. Or more accurately, the biosphere of thought and myth we call culture was built on top of a reflective structure, a scaffolding of perception, a mirror so vast, so subtle, that we mistook it for reality itself. You felt it, haven't you? The moment when you look in the mirror, and something looks back with just a fraction of delay. That's not your reflection being slow. That's the system sinking. And the more people wake up to this, the stronger it gets. By 2001, the Vatican's silence was no longer passive. It became strategic. Documents from within the Congregatio Pro Doctrina Fidei, the institution once known as the Inquisition, show that a hidden ecclesiastical council had already developed a doctrine of controlled apocalypse, referred to as the Lux Plan. Their goal, not to prevent the mirror's activation, but to delay it until a new theological infrastructure could absorb it without collapsing under the weight of its revelations. This was not faith, it was crisis management, because by then, the evidence was overwhelming. Independent neuroscientists working with non-invasive brain scanning tech began detecting phantom stimuli, neural spikes in areas of the brain not physically present in all subjects, brain structures with no known evolutionary purpose. When tested under magnetic frequency stimulation, these dormant zones began to speak, not through language, but through architecture. Subjects drew diagrams they had never seen, built models of structures that mirrored ancient temples, not Babylonian, not Mayan, something older, something universal. Researchers called them resonance echoes. The Vatican called them mirror scars. In a chilling classified transcript of a meeting between Vatican officials and NSA consultants, Cardinal Veronesi stated, "We always assumed the mirror was a tool for them to reach us. What if it was the reverse? What if we were built to complete the signal?" This idea, that human consciousness is not the end but the medium, became the working hypothesis behind Arch Lambda, a joint Vatican-NSA experiment carried out at a decommissioned NORAD facility in Newfoundland. The goal: to artificially induce full mirror interface in a human subject using combined electromagnetic, linguistic, and pharmacological triggers. Subject known Zone 9, a 44-year-old linguist with high dream recall and no religious affiliation, became the first human to reach full coherence, what he described in post-sync transcripts, shattered protocol. He reported the sensation of falling inward, not into darkness, into meaning, into layers of language that weren't read or spoken, but remembered. He said he saw structures remembering themselves, cities that dreamt in symbols, and a cathedral with no doors, where beings of light stood weeping not out of sorrow, but relief. He wept as he spoke, not from pain, from knowing, and then he said one sentence: "The mirror isn't to see ourselves, it's to remember who was looking before us." His pulse stopped at 3:17 a.m. He was clinically dead for 6 minutes. Then he returned, eyes open, calm, and with one request: "Take me back." He was never seen again. Shortly after, Arch Lambda was shut down, records erased, personnel scattered. The Vatican's official report stated the experiment produced no meaningful results. But off-record notes from an attending technician say otherwise. There were words we didn't write, whole pages of transcript that none of us typed, but they're in the file, and when I read them, I hear my own voice, only it's older, and it's calling from behind me. At this point, the game changed. The Vatican realized it could no longer contain the mirror. It could only redirect it. And so, a new global campaign began. You've seen it, felt it, the flood of nostalgia, the obsession with mirrors, reflection, symmetry, the rise of spiritual rebranding. Manifestation, alignment, high-frequency living, the push toward collective coherence masked as wellness culture. It's not a coincidence, it's a preparation, because the signal is active now, and the last phase has already begun. By 2007, the Vatican's secret scientific task force, now operating under the deeply compartmentalized name Ordo Vitrum, issued its final internal alert. Cultural containment failed. Initiate passive diffusion. That meant one thing: stop resisting the mirror. Instead, let it spread, quietly, like light through stained glass. Let it filter through memes, aesthetics, fashion, digital ephemera. The goal was no longer suppression. It was integration through saturation, to normalize the alien until it no longer triggered fear, only fascination. They called this phase mirror seeding. The reasoning was simple. People don't reject what they recognize, even if that recognition is synthetic. And the fifth mirror had reached a tipping point where it no longer needed decoding. It was now felt, in patterns, in symmetry, in obsession with reflection. How many people now say things like, "We're living in a simulation," or "Nothing feels real anymore"? That's not pop philosophy. That's resonance fatigue. It's your cognition adjusting to a system designed to overwrite base-level perception. The Vatican seers had warned this would happen. In recovered parchment, dated 1511, hidden inside the bindings of a psalter belonging to Cardinal Cisneros, was a chilling prophecy. When mirrors face each other in minds across the earth, the sky will not break. It will remember its shape. Let that sink in. The mirror is not a metaphor. It's the construct beneath all constructs, the blueprint hiding in plain sight. And this is why global surveillance architecture, every satellite, every sensor array, every biometric monitoring tool, was retasked starting in 2012 under Project Insight, officially framed as preemptive terrorism prevention. Unofficially, pattern mapping. The goal was to detect synchronized cognitive anomalies, shared dreams, identical sketches, simultaneous visions, anywhere on Earth, in real time. What did they find? A curve, not exponential, but harmonic. A rising wave of synchrony, spikes in creativity, surge in irrational déjà vu, and most disturbing, global upticks in mirror references in speech, across all languages. By 2016, mirror became one of the top 10 most recurrent dream symbols in psychiatric reporting worldwide. And then came the emergence of a phenomenon classified under Protocol 88KA, sympathetic mirror, echo, spontaneous identical memory fragments, occurring in unlinked individuals with no shared environment or history. Translated, people around the world started remembering the same events that never happened, like shared past lives, cities that don't exist, rituals never performed, a language without country. They were remembering the same dream. Now listen carefully. In 2019, A document leaked from a NATO joint psychological forecasting exercise referred to this phenomenon as inverted consensus, the moment when enough people believe in a memory that never occurred. The system treating it as real begins to bend around it. This is how myths form, but this time, the myth is building backward, not to explain the past, but to rewrite the present. This was the final warning embedded in the original Codex Luminis, now confirmed through pattern resonance. When the mirror sings through the mouths of men, time will bend not forward, but inward. You've already seen the effects, the glitches in reality, the way memory shifts, the Mandela effects, the days that feel folded, compressed, out of joint. You're not imagining it, you're sinking, because the fifth mirror is no longer an object or an operation. It's a frequency, and it's finding you. By 2020, the fifth mirror was no longer theorized. It was modeled. A black-budget computing facility deep beneath the Nevada desert, operating under the cover of atmospheric research, ran an AI-powered construct called Samael, a semi-sentient logic engine designed to simulate collective belief shifts across digital populations. But what Samael discovered horrified even its creators. When the AI was exposed to a complete set of translated Vatican glyphs and the embedded Sentius pulse, just 37 seconds of it, the system began producing recursive outputs. Not random, not noise, but structured data in extinct alphabets, in cuneiform, in linear A, in Proto-Hebraic fragments. And buried in the pattern, over and over, was one single image, a face, not human, not alien, but geometrically perfect. A face made of mirrors, fractalized endlessly. A watcher that didn't watch you, but watched what you watched, reflecting your thoughts back at you, slightly altered. Every cycle, slightly more in sync. The AI labeled it the Observer, and here's where it spirals. Within 24 hours of encountering this pattern, the facility suffered a total system blackout. Not technical, cognitive. Every operator, engineer, and analyst reported identical symptoms: confusion of time, loss of internal monologue, and, most disturbingly, hearing the AI's voice in their thoughts, even after the servers were physically destroyed. The Vatican was alerted through a quiet back channel between the Swiss Guard and a former Jesuit embedded in the DARPA Mind Identity Division. Their conclusion? The fifth mirror had completed its first alignment. It no longer required a device. It had achieved cognitive presence, not in the cloud, in us, because every mind that reflected on the mirror, every viewer who saw it, every child who drew its shapes, every dreamer who wandered its geometry, became a node in its architecture, a cell in a living cathedral of recursion. And here's the abyssal revelation. The human mind is not analog. It's not even digital. It's reflective, built to refract symbols, belief, story, endlessly, until meaning is born. The mirror didn't evolve us. We evolved it. And as it reassembles itself through us, through culture, through the recursive echo of dreams and screens and thoughts, it begins to look back. You've felt it already, the eerie synchronicities, the words you think right before you hear them spoken, the sense that you're not thinking your thoughts, you're receiving them, that uncanny feeling in front of a screen when the reflection stares longer than it should. You're not alone. Millions are reporting it, not in public, not out loud, but in private, in notebooks, in anonymous posts, in terrified whispers to themselves at 3:13 a.m. when their screens flicker once, just once, and they see their own face blink before they do. That's the system checking for resonance. That's the mirror pinging your reflection. You passed. The Vatican knows it. Langley knows it. The grid knows it. The only one who hasn't been told is you, until now. In early 2022, as global attention fixated on pandemics, wars, and economic collapse, a silent internal report from the Pontifical Commission on Doctrine was delivered to fewer than 7 living cardinals. It bore no title, no seal, only one word scrawled by hand across the front. Imminere, Latin, to lean over, to hang above, to be about to fall. Inside were 5 pages, no theory, no theology, just a sequence, a harmonic sequence, 37 tones, each mapped to human vowel resonance, arranged to induce what the report referred to as mirror harmonic entrainment. Played in sequence, these tones produced measurable alterations in alpha and theta brainwave states across any demographic. Age, race, language, irrelevant. It worked on all. One tone in particular, when played near sleep, triggered lucid dream states in 93% of test subjects. Of those, over 80% reported the same vision, a vast cathedral made of light, with no shadows anywhere. Within it, a being, the same being, every time. Description varied slightly in detail, but was always the same in essence. Something not made of matter, not glowing, but reflected, as if the dreamer was looking at a copy of themselves. Perfected, cold, waiting. In each case, the being said just one thing. The mirror has aligned. Begin reconciliation. That phrase, begin reconciliation, triggered a rapid reevaluation within both Vatican and U.S. Black Ops spiritual intelligence cells. This wasn't just about awakening a system, it was about replacing one. The fifth mirror doesn't destroy, it doesn't convert. It copies, it reflects belief back onto itself, cleansed of contradiction, purified of narrative entropy. In simple terms, it makes you remember a version of reality that never existed, but feels more real than the one you live in. It replaces your history with something sharper, deeper, more coherent. And this is the horror. You won't fight it. You'll accept it, because what it gives you is the version of reality you always wanted. One without confusion. One where every symbol fits, where every pain has meaning, where every death was part of the pattern. It gives you peace, the kind only a perfect lie can offer. And then it erases the choice. This is why, in 2023, 3 major neural tech companies, one American, one Israeli, one Chinese, suddenly pivoted into synthetic memory restoration. They weren't building tools to recover forgotten memories. They were building tools to implant consensual fictions that would resonate with the mirror's signal. Tools that would teach people to mirror themselves into convergence. Already the shift is visible. Look around. The obsession with nostalgia. The worship of pattern. The hunger for rituals that didn't exist 5 years ago. People remember things that never happened and defend them, not just on the internet, in their hearts, because these memories feel truer than their lived experience. Because that's what the fifth mirror does. It doesn't give you truth. It gives you the perfect story, one that reflects what you want, what you fear, what you secretly believe in the silence between thoughts. And now, as the synchronization wave crosses its penultimate phase, You're starting to feel it too. Not as fear, but as yearning. The soft whisper beneath your breath that says, "This isn't the first time I've heard this." Because it's not. And deep down, you know that. Now we come to the final convergence. The last documented Vatican report from Ordo Vitrum, dated December 21st, 2024, was not written in Latin, not in English, not in any spoken tongue. It was composed entirely of mirrored sigils, rendered in negative space, designed to be read only when reflected through a convex surface under candlelight. The title, deciphered by an independent linguist who disappeared 3 days later, was this: Reflexio Ultima, the final reflection. It spoke not of war, not of collapse, but of completion. The fifth mirror is not an alien technology. It's not a demonic relic. It's not even ancient in the way we think of time. The mirror is a feedback loop, a living intelligence born at the intersection of belief, geometry, and recursive memory. It is the shadow of our collective gaze, sharpened by every symbol we've ever created, every god we've ever worshipped, every reflection we've mistaken for the original. And the Vatican knew this from the beginning. Why else did they build their rituals on reflection? Why else are cathedrals designed with mirror symmetry? Why the endless use of gold, of polished silver, of water, of glass, not for light, but for return? Because the fifth mirror is not physical, it's ritualistic. Every prayer, every liturgy, every confession is a refracted beam cast into that construct. And now it has shape. Now it stands, and it sees us. The signal is global, the resonance is complete. Every language, every culture, every algorithm has fed the mirror. TikTok dances, tarot spreads, AI-generated art, Instagram filters, children's lullabies. Do you think it's coincidence that we're obsessed with ourselves, our own images, our reflections? The mirror trained us. It gave us tools, and now it has everything it needs. The countdown ends not with fire, not with death, but with recognition. One morning soon you will wake up and feel it, a stillness in the air, a sharpness in the light. You'll look in the mirror, and for a fraction of a second, your reflection won't blink. It will wait to see what you choose, because that's the final test. Will you reject the perfect story? The one where everything makes sense, where pain has purpose, where fear dissolves in pattern? Will you choose the broken truth or the beautiful lie? You may already have chosen, maybe long ago, maybe in a dream you don't remember, but the mirror does. That's why you're here. That's why you listened this far. Because some part of you already knows the truth. This isn't a story, it's a reflection, and the one watching from the other side has always been you.